Welcome, everyone. We are for today. We're an agency of industry leaders, and we all bring a breadth of experience to drive innovation and create the future. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can create the future of strategic planning and cohesive teams. But first, I want to introduce our team. This is Maya Zuckerman. She is the COO of Lumen. And we have Philip Horvath, the CCO of Lumen. And Tirza Hollenhorst, welcome, the CEO of Lumen.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you again. We are meeting here every Thursday to go over just really important topics that we're all facing in fields of innovation and collaboration and really building strong, thriving teams in this time. So right now, a lot of teams are coming into their Q4 planning and really preparing to plan for 2021. And that's particularly challenging because we're working with team members we haven't seen in months, and sometimes even with team members we've never actually been physically in the room with. And while we've gained some great skills on how to be productive together, when it comes to strategic planning, there's a need to really align our vision as well as manage conflict, manage priorities, and collaborate in a different way to create something new. And that faces a lot of fresh challenges remotely. So how do we do this? And what can you as a leader do? So starting with, how can we create a coherent strategic plan when our team is not in a physical location? And how can we support better meetings, innovation, and continuous work in times of uncertainty? The things we're going to go over today apply not just to strategic planning, but really any kind of collaborative meeting. Because we know in all of this, where we have all the technology and we have the information, the human component is more important than ever. And so we find that we're really working with those leaders who are creating the future and recognizing that the human component is the most important thing in all of that. As a leader, it's important to think about the primary building blocks of successful leadership. At Lumen, we really look at those as mindset, behaviors, and outcomes. So our mindset is where we're coming from. And as a leader, you need to cultivate growth, inclusion, and invitation. The behaviors that come out of those mindsets are having an effective cadence of communication and repeatable structures for meetings. So when people know what they're going to come into with the meeting, they're able to relax and move through the meeting rather than having this sense of anticipation of what's going to come. Am I going to get a chance to speak? Is what's important to me going to get covered? We know that there's a time and a place for everything. And finally, the outcomes of a meeting, if everybody's got a sense of ownership that we're all here to collaboratively create the meeting that we want, and we're all focused on getting the results that we want, we have a very different sense than if I'm just showing up and expecting somebody else to lead this meeting and get me through it. All good collaboration and the basis of all high-performing teams is psychological safety. So psychological safety really refers to a lot of different things, but what it starts with is communication. What do we mean when we say communication? So communication's got many components. It starts with just what's your intention? What are you trying to communicate? What are you seeking to share? Is your intention in your communication to be comprehended? Is your intention to be right? It's important to focus in and know where we're coming from. And then your attention. Where's your attention when you're communicating? Are you focused on what do I look like and how do I sound? Or are you focused on, is the person that I'm communicating with still with me? Are they comprehending what I'm saying? Are they interested in what I'm saying? How is what I'm saying landing with them? And fortunately, now we're all working over Zoom, so we can actually have a sense of who we're communicating with. And then we move on to completion. So after I've communicated with you, it's important for me to like ask and wait for, what did you hear me say, so that we actually know that we're in a dialogue. If my intention is just to be right and to be heard, then I'll skip this step and I'll kind of move on like, okay, I've said my piece. But if my intention is to actually create a container of psychological safety and ensure that we're actually completing the loop of communication, then once I've said something, I'll check for comprehension. Retention. Did what I say actually land? And do I think that somebody's actually going to retain what was said? We all have been in meetings that we came out of and we're like, I don't actually know what was said in that. Or think of any conferences that you went to, especially the ones online now where you're listening but not really listening. Solid communication has to have that retention component. And finally, like knowing where you're coming from and creating expansion. Sometimes we get into the mindset of it has to be this or this. We know we're in an either or mindset if we're saying yes, but. But if we are coming from a place of expansion, when somebody shares something that we have something to add to, we'll say yes. And have you thought about? Oh, and have we considered? That's an interesting viewpoint. Have we looked at this other viewpoint? If we are looking to be inclusive and include all voices and opinions, then that means that when people are dissenting, or even if you feel like they're wrong, you're creating an expansive container where they can be heard, felt, and seen. So in our fields of remote communication, it's really easy to think like, oh, I've said it, so it must have landed. The thing is, we all have so much going on and there's so much information that over communicating is really needed in this time more than ever. And so over communication looks like providing a step-by-step process for people that maybe includes more detail than you would have anticipated you needed, or communicating with people more often than you might have otherwise. While it may feel like overkill for you or like you're spoon feeding information to people in this time of over information and just rapid changes in our overall system, the continuous communication lets us know, okay, that was the plan and the plan is still on. Just being mindful that we have a lot of channels. We're all working on Zoom. We've got our chat channels. We have email. Deciding as a team what channel we're going to use for what communication helps us ensure that we keep tasks in their proper place, social sharing in its proper place, and important notes in their proper place. Moving on.
Thank you for that. Actually, it's one of my pet peeves when, you expect something in email and then you get a WhatsApp in the middle of the night and those kind of things. So I think it's super important to be really mindful of what works for you as a team and what doesn't, right? And to really have, as you said, like clear principles in place, and even, be mindful of the purpose of your communication. And when we work on things in Lumen and also with our clients, we usually have sort of 4 buckets that communications fall into even. Right? And we call them the 4 pillars of strategic planning and purpose-driven strategic planning. But it's really 4 pillars of making sure that what you're doing is actually in alignment. Right? The first one being purpose, right? You're really clear on why are you communicating, why are you getting together, why are you having a meeting, right? And when people hear purpose, they think, of course, saving the whales and saving the turtles and saving the oceans and saving the forests. That's not what purpose is all about, right? I mean, it can be your purpose, absolutely, but we look at it as in the sense of why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Why does my organization even exist? Or why does my project exist? Or why does my team exist, right? What's the purpose of these individual projects you're running, right? And really looking at signals out there, looking at what are problems that we're perceiving as a team, what are issues that we want to address, and making that your clear purpose, a stated purpose. Because when you have something to anchor around, we'll get back to that in another moment. The next component is vision, right? And here it's really once I have a purpose and I have a problem, I'm clear on that, we get to expand as teams and really think about what are some of the possibilities, right? You might want to actually separate these meetings, right? Where you have one meeting where everybody brings in their signal, right? When we do that with teams, we usually have a first meeting where we bring people together, collect their signals, and then come up with a common purpose. And then use the next meeting to really think about possibilities and what is the possible vision, right? What could be accomplished in Q4, for example, right? Or what is possible in 2021, right? And it's easy to feel like we need to react and we can't say anything because there's so much uncertainty. The good news is if you don't know where you want to go, you can choose where you want to go, right? So really vision is not about having to know what's happening. It's really more about choosing where you want to go and having an emotionally connected vision of that. And really to figure out what does it look like once they succeeded, right? Because you want to have that sense of, have an image, right? And vision really as an emotionally charged image of the future of what does it look like when it's done. Because then you can back in from there into really understanding what are the different elements you need, right? What are milestones you need to complete it to get there? What are some of the outcomes that you want to commit to? And finally, of course, when you commit to something, you want to also measure, right? And we kind of moved away from the idea of goals, because a lot of times, similar to that either or thing that Tilda talked about a moment ago, it's with a goal, it's like, oh, you hit it or you didn't hit it, right? And did you hit it at the end of the year? And it's like, are you going to wait until the end of the year to see if you hit your numbers? No, right? You want to actually have progress indicators, right? You want to measure continuously, am I living up to my commitments? Am I on the right track, right? Knowing that where I'm going is actually working for me. So those are kind of the four basic elements. If you go a little bit deeper into this, if you think about purpose, really coming back to it's a clear reason why, right? And it's not, as I said, it has to be nothing special, nothing fancy. It's just being really connected and as a team collectively connected to your why, right? Because then you have intrinsic motivation, right? And intrinsic motivation comes from two things. It comes from meaning and impact, right? Meaning is a vision of myself, like who am I going to be at the end of this? Right, and the impact is what's the bigger picture? Why? Right, like what's going to be in the world because of this? Right, so when I think about any project, you want to have a personal commitment from the person that runs it to actually know who they're going to be when they succeeded with it, right? When they created this, because then purpose can create this aligned direction for your team, right? And again, you might not know tactics, but if you say, hey, here's where we're going, right? This is the problem we're solving in the world. Right? You can always find your way back together. And it creates this value focus because in the end, purpose is about solving someone's problem. Right? There's someone out there who has an issue that you decide you want to solve, right? That's your problem, your purpose. You have a vision of what it's going to look like when it's solved. And so you keep looking, what can I do today to add value towards that? Right? And it creates an urgency because if someone has a problem, why would you want to wait for them to have that problem longer? Right? And that doesn't have to be a social problem. It can just be, your colleague in the accounting department who does a stupid report every day because she doesn't get those numbers, right? And making sure that she actually gets those numbers faster can be fully awesome purpose. And why would you want this poor woman to deal with a stupid old Excel spreadsheet for any long day longer, right? You want to make sure that you get that done as fast as possible so you can create urgency for your team as well. And of course, enrollment, right? The ability to bring people on board. Because if you have a purpose that's exciting, right, one of the issues we find a lot in the corporate environments we work in is silos, right? Because this people over here have a purpose, we have a purpose over here, and purpose can actually help you create a commonality, right? You can say, hey, we're all here to serve this customer, right? And so you can bring people on board, get people excited, and make them join your cause. And even then allow for some self-organization, right? Because once everybody's clear on purpose, then you can make a decision around that purpose. And autonomously, you don't need to have trickle-down micromanagement. You can actually let your team come up with ways to surprise you, right? And I think that's important, especially in these times of uncertainty. Many leaders were trained to be the ones with the answer, right? They were the experts, which got them into leadership positions. And today, nobody knows anymore. Nobody is really the expert in the future. So it's really important to allow room for emergence. And allowing that, you don't always have to agree, but you're aligned, you keep going in the same direction together. Right? And the difference here is that agreement is really about specific conditions of fulfillment. You're going to do this X by day Y, right? And this is going to look like when it's done. And it's important, just as I already mentioned, the communication as well, to be really clear as a team, and especially remotely. And check 3 times on making sure that you made a clear request or someone made a clear request of you, that you're really clear on what you're agreeing to with each other. right? Because especially in this volatile time, that's what gives you a foundation, right? You're clear on your agreements with each other as a team, and make sure you track them somewhere in a system. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of the tools to make sure that we're tracking our agreements, because if we don't, those go out the window very quickly. And then it's a he said, she said kind of situation versus actually saying, hey, this is what we agreed upon. And it was a very clear request. Versus alignment is really about this shared purpose, right? And just keep swimming in the same direction. Right? So allow yourself, when it comes to big picture things like purpose and vision, to make sure that you focus on alignment, right? And only when you come to the more nitty-gritty detail around milestones and progress, that you really shift into an agreement space and make sure you have solid agreements in place. Right? Because then you can keep working towards that vision. Right? And as I said, it's emotionally charged imagination of a future. Right? There's an image there that you want to develop with your team of really feeling it. And the more you feel it, the more you're emotionally connected to it, the easier it's going to be in times when you don't feel so good, or when you have conflict, or when there are situations that cause delay, to really get that energy back going. Right? Because in the end, emotion is what moves you, right? There's motion in the word even. So if you're not emotionally connected to your vision of the outcome, it's just a drudgery task, right? So you have to have that inspiring element here. And then, as I said, be clear about portfolio, right? And to really make sure that you, whatever break down from that big purpose, from that vision, break it down to events that are very clear and definable. Like, when do I know this is done? I don't collect tasks, because there can be thousands of them. Collect, this is what it's going to look like when it's done on that day. Right? And then you have a clear target and clear pieces to work on. And of course, those in a virtual world need to be chunked a little bit. And then let Maya tell you a little bit more about the planning and how to plan in virtual times, because there's also quite a bit of a difference here compared to what we were able to do when we were still in the room with each other.
Yeah, and this is quite important, that planning overall, whether we were in the pre-COVID time or now, has been transitioning to be more agile. And when we're more agile, that means, it doesn't mean that things keep changing. It means that we actually check in quicker. So we don't have yearly goals. We actually have monthly goals. We'll have quarterly goals or outcomes that we're working towards. And we chunk them much smaller, and we work on them in depending on the cadence that works for your office, in kind of either 1 week or 2 weeks, what we call sprints. So they're just points in time where we finish something together, and then we assess how much did we get finished. Did we get at least 80% finished, or do we need to reassess how long we give specific tasks and projects in order to finish them. And we love the conversation of daily stand-ups and meeting and feedbacks and feed forward, and not waiting on that for more than a couple of weeks, because then we can actually move the projects and the decision making much faster and eliminate any kind of big failures or people moving towards something that they shouldn't work on. And it actually creates a lot of the challenges of remote working, where we don't feel we're as isolated. We actually have these multiple touch points to actually see how we move these projects forward. And there's so many tools and processes out there. I wrote down the Agile, Scrum, Kanban. They're very, very similar. There's different ways of doing them. And they really help breaking down a very big projects into things that the team can actually work with and get alignment and an agreement on how we work on these specific projects. So next slide, please. Thank you. And we need to measure, and we need to actually have good measurement tools on what does it actually mean that we're going in the right direction. Some things are very simple, like if it is a team that works on social media strategy and you're trying to actually get bigger numbers, that's very easy. Your metrics might be, likes, follows, and all the different attribution metrics that you can measure. But when you're actually working with a team that metrics measurement or numbers measurement is not applicable, then really look at progress, or look at, are we heading in the right direction? Did we actually get to a finished product in the time that we actually said that it would take? And that actually shows, and as a team also, I think other measurements within the progress is also, is the team excited, and also can we actually measure, is this good work, is this something that we can actually move towards, and it's actually moving the needle towards where we want to go. So those are different ways you can actually measure if your team is moving in the right direction, and especially moving online. And we come back to communication. As a leader, over communication in a healthy manner, asking your team if they're ready for that communication, and seeing that they're actually how the morale is. I know we're all having quite difficult times during these times, and over checking can actually be overkill, but that also helps with moving towards the target of moving a project forward. And we need new tools. So there's a lot of new tools out there. And we're all a little bit tired of Zoom. So what can we do during these times? So if you're all completely remote and there's no way of even taking a walk, socially safe walk together once a month, if that is a possibility, I would encourage that, as long as you keep on the safe measurements. But otherwise, there are other tools out there to actually help you with team building. There's a company that are friends of ours, Go Games. They're actually creating these very fun interactive games using video and interactive tools to break a little bit the let's have a beer or a drink or a non-alcoholic drink if that's what you need after work, or have a happy hour, which I've seen some companies do to just create that team building. I think at some point that also becomes boring. So looking what's out there and testing with your teams different things, so it creates some form of relaxation within the team and some creativity. And then you can move into using different ideation liberating structures, and then looking at what other platforms are out there for collaboration. Miro and Mural are two amazing collaborative tools for everything from Kanban to sketching to basically having your design thinking board with virtual post-it notes. And that really helps with strategy, that really helps with brainstorming. So we really advocate using tools like that. There's also all kinds of mind mapping tools on the market, and a lot of sketching tools. We will provide a deeper list of all of those in our later leave behind. Follow us on email, and you can get that in the next couple of days. And then, of course, the latest is virtual reality and actually virtual worlds. They've been here for quite a while, so it shouldn't be something that stops one of your workers from being part of it for reasons of they need to buy an expensive tool, or some people actually do get very nauseous in virtual reality. So if we want to actually have a environment of inclusivity, that could be something that might prevent some people from joining. So having immersive meetings in even like 2D, 3D, Second Life is still around. Outspace VR now has both Windows 2D, and they've just released their beta for Mac. So there's other virtual worlds you can actually explore doing a couple of the meetings in. Some teams would love it, some teams won't. I think it's about testing, not telling people that this is what's going to happen. And since you might have different experiences with working with people on your team, some teams have never met. This could be an interesting way to encouraging more creativity, but also work on your strategic plans in a way, because strategic plans do call for creativity and thinking outside the box. And that might help with removing the kind of, I think we all have a Zoom fatigue that we have all been experiencing, and actually getting our creative juices going. So these are just a few of the different ideas that we use. And I think mixing it up is really the point. Not only relying always on Zoom, always on Mural, but actually deciding as a team, what tool do we use for what kind of meeting. So also that's another way of creating that expectation for people that they know what they're doing when they're coming into that meeting, but then they have that sense of diversity in the way they work. So it doesn't become so monotonous being on a Zoom in this way every day, day in, day out. So yeah, that's a few of the ideas that we wanted to share with you on platforms and systems. So how do you prepare your people for the future? Well, you engage with us more, and this is some of the projects and ways you can engage with us. We have a strategic planning for remote teams. You can reach us at connect@lumen.io and inquire on how you work and bring this to your team. We also have a high performing remote team course, and also we will share in the comments a link to our workbook that we created a few months ago that really is specific for how to support high performing remote team. And then otherwise we have work that we can do together alongside you and your team for remote facilitation, for innovation, and supporting your teams work together, your culture, and how you create a better future for your team and your company. So please connect with us, and Kat, take us out.
Thanks everybody for coming. And if you got value out of today's topic, let us know. Let us know what's resonating with you. Any questions you may have, just shoot us a comment. And if you got value out of today, then like our page. And we really look forward to hearing from you. Thanks everyone.